Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Kay Northrup with me. Kay is the owner and chief event producer of Kay Northrup Events, a wedding planning company specializing in stepping outside of the comfort zone. K&E serves untraditional couples looking for permission to celebrate their marriage their way. Given Kay's love for travel, she specializes in destination weddings and has so far planned weddings across 3 continents, 8 countries, and 9 US states. Kay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
Of course, thankful to have you on. So, I think for people that don't know you, do you want to take us back to the beginning? Where you grew up, your family situation, maybe what type of kid you were?
Yeah. I was a rule follower as a child. I'll tell you all about it. So a lot of people know me by my maiden name, Kaylee Kroll, born and raised as Kaylee Kroll. And now I'm Kay Northrup. So when I started my company, it was kind of it felt like a stage name for a while. Honestly, I had just gotten married. So Northrup was new to me. And I started going by Kay instead of Kaylee for many reasons, mostly because you can't misspell K, but you can misspell Kaylee.
Yes.
So I grew up Kaylee Kroll, 15 minutes down the road from where I live now. I'm in Bristol, Rhode Island now. I grew up in East Providence, Rhode Island. Lived in Boston for a little bit with my husband and then moved back here. And growing up, had, your typical Catholic school education from preschool through 12th grade, and then went to not a Catholic college. So that was an interesting breaking out into society.
Yeah.
As a child, I was really, really shy until about 5th grade. And even kind of in high school, I didn't really know you and feel comfortable in the room. I didn't really say much. I was so paranoid about following the rules, doing the right thing. Probably has a bit of that Catholic guilt and Catholic influence built in there. Lots to unpack there, but yeah, that definitely has impacted a lot of my growth as an adult now. Kind of doing things untraditionally, I think is a bit rebellious because of the upbringing that I had. And I love I always say, I'm a bit crass, but I always say I like to chuck the bird to tradition sometimes. And I do think it is my own personal way of kind of breaking out and doing whatever the hell I want, after being such in a rigid environment growing up.
Yeah. You got to live your own way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, maybe as you look back at your maybe 0 to 18 years of life, was obviously today you're an entrepreneur, but was that something you were thinking about, especially given your background? Maybe maybe money wasn't as emphasized as
Mm-hmm.
maybe the humanities were, or
Yeah.
things like that. Or is that something that came about later in life?
I think I always knew I wanted to be in charge, not because of a power struggle, but just because my mom was the working parent. My dad also worked, but he was definitely more of our stay-at-home figure. And my mom, showed me very young that you can work really hard and you can make money for yourself and you can be in a position where you're in charge. And I just kind of knew, well, that's automatically how I want to be. And so when I started wising up to the fact that you don't have to necessarily have your time micromanaged by a boss and you could be a business owner, that was very appealing to me at a young age. I think I probably realized that in high school that the ultimate goal for me was to be an entrepreneur. And that was really good foresight to have, because every decision I made, every job I took, every role I had was with that in the back of my mind. For a while, I wanted to be a journalist, but I really think I was influenced by Rory Gilmore from Gilmore Girls, a
Yeah,
fictional
yeah,
character
yeah, yeah.
who went to Yale. And I just loved her and I love Gilmore Girls. But the joke's on me because I actually ended up being a lot more like Lorelai, the mom who opened her own inn. And it's very full circle for me because I always wanted to be like Lorelai. So I had those two strong fictional characters kind of guiding me along, and then my mom setting that example for me that kind of led me down the path where I am now. But yeah, the main goal was to be a journalist. That
Well,
obviously did not happen.
yeah. I'm also curious. I mean, today you're very comfortable in your skin. Given the sort of rigid upbringing of Catholic school and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any piece of advice to like the 16-year-old girl today who just like knows this is not it, the uniforms or the
Mm-hmm.
the prayers and the responses?
Yeah, God, there's so much there. I think that for me, when I look back on those times, the education was phenomenal. I'm extremely grateful for the investment that my parents made, right? Because it was expensive to put me in 12 plus years of private Catholic education. I think looking back, it definitely sheltered me and shelters a lot of other people. I think if you are a devout Catholic and live and breathe that way of life fully, it's a wonderful thing. If you're not, you may struggle with having a hard time thinking critically. And that's what I found. When you have preschool, kindergarten, all the way through 12th grade, and you're required to take a religion class, and you're being graded on your knowledge of a religion that you may not 100% subscribe to, it really affected my ability to question things. And so my biggest advice for anybody in that position right now, if you have found yourself living and breathing a religion that you didn't choose, think critically about it and make sure that you do choose it. If you do choose it, that's amazing. And it's kind of like what confirmation is in the Catholic faith. But I was 15 when I made my confirmation and I was still being graded on religion every year. So and I still at that point was never told to question my religion. So how could you possibly be an adult and choose at 15 when that's all you know? And so it wasn't until I graduated high school, went to Emerson, and that's the most LGBTQ friendly college in the country. It was such an amazing experience, completely opposite of the upbringing I had. I mean, you look back on that and you're like, God, I wish someone told me like, this isn't the only option, and that's kind of something that looking forward to raising future kids, my husband and I talk about all the time. We want to raise kids that know how to think critically. And if they have a question like, Mom, does God exist? It's like, what do you think? This is what I think, because I have my own view of why we're all here and what it all means. And my husband has his own view of that. But I want my kids to know that I'll tell them this is what your grandma thinks of that. And there's no wrong answer. We can all believe what we want to believe, but I want you to choose what you want, not tell you that's the only option.
That was really well said. Wow.
Thanks.
Yeah, thinking
It's
critically.
I
Yeah,
had one of
yeah.
those spiritual enlightenment moments a few years ago, and I was like, oh my God.
I've never thought about myself forming the opinion first. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you mentioned it there. You went to Emerson. Um, I guess, can you talk to us about what your mindset there was? I know you ended up with a
Yeah.
Bachelor of Science in Marketing Communications and
Yes.
Business.
Mm-hmm.
Just talk to us about what you were thinking about at Emerson.
So I went to Emerson because I wanted to be a journalist. Like that Rory Gilmore thing carried me all the way up until I was 18, making the biggest decision of which college to go to. And Emerson was like one of the top 5 communication schools in the country. And so I was on the path to get a Bachelor of Science in Journalism, and specifically broadcast journalism, because I feel very comfortable being on camera. I've always loved it. And the job to me was so enticing, not just because of Rory Gilmore, but because it was something different every day. Like you would go into work and you didn't know what story you would be writing that day or reporting on. And then I realized the reason why I shifted, there was a couple things. I studied abroad as a sophomore, and I didn't take any journalism classes while I was there because of the way that the curriculum worked abroad. And I didn't miss it. And I was like, if this was really my life passion that I'm going to do every day, I feel like I should be yearning for something journalism related. And it felt like a very nice reprieve from journalism while I was studying abroad. So I was like, well, that's red flag number one. And secondly, I'm very susceptible to like negativity and outside bad energy affecting my mood. And when you actually watch the news, it's very negative. And so I was going to step into a role inviting negativity and taking the negativity, turning it into news, and then giving it to the people. I just didn't see how I could be happy every day doing that. And then also I realized, okay, journalism is not it. What is it? It immediately came to me. I know that is not the case for a lot of people. It's a lot of like years of searching for some people. But for me, I just thought back to all of the jobs that I'd had. I had 5 jobs almost every summer just so that I could make money to travel. That's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, when was I the happiest? It was the happiest being a cater waiter at weddings in Newport every summer. Like, who knew? Making $12 an hour, cater waitering at weddings, hard work, covered in food. You would wake up the next day with your feet hurting so bad, but I loved it. You drive home at 1:00 in the morning, blasting music with the windows down so that you'd stay awake. Like, I loved it. And so I was like, I can make a career out of that. So the reason I ended up with a marketing degree is because there is no hospitality degree at Emerson. So I said, okay, what can I do with this? Because I'm not just going to drop out of school, right? Like I still wanted the degree. So I knew back in my mind, you're probably going to want to be a business owner on top of being a wedding planner. So marketing is probably going to be helpful to you. And at the very least, you should need to know how to market yourself so that you can get the jobs that you need to get to the places that you want to go. So I was like, this is just a life skill I'm going to need. And then I just switched from journalism to marketing. Thankfully, lots of the credits rolled over. And then I wanted to do a minor in entrepreneurship, but I wasn't going to be able to graduate early the way I wanted. So I just did a minor in business.
Yeah. Awesome. So I saw, during that time period that you worked at Blackstone Caterers and Raffinelli Events, was, I guess, maybe speak, I think Raffinelli Events, you ended up spending close to like 2.5, 3 years at, I guess 2-part question. First, like, did you have a plan and like a mindset, like, hey, I'm going to work 3 years in the events space and then start my own, or was that timing sort of more less planned out? And then 2, I guess, like, can you talk about the value of like interning and I mean, you had a full-time job, I believe, with Raffinelli Events.
I started as an intern and then I got hired full-time. And Blackstone was the place where I was like $12 an hour as a cater waiter. Then I got promoted to a sales intern in the summer for $15 an hour. And then I got promoted to an event manager for $19 an hour. So I just like worked my way up there. And then Raffinelli, unpaid internship twice a week for 2 semesters, basically like all of 2016. And then they almost never hire right out of college because it's not technically an entry-level job. I was very, very fortunate to get a full-time job basically right after I hired. It just so happens like the opening came and I aggressively went for it. I still believe to this day that if I didn't make a couple of follow-up calls or a couple of decisions that I made, I wouldn't have gotten that job. Because I got it because I was very persistent with some people. And I've heard that feedback from them after that. So I really think everything happens for a reason. But, if they don't hire interns right out of college, make them need you. What's the benefit? You're cheap, you're young, you're hungry, you're humble, and so they saw that. So they hired me. And so I was there for a while. The whole long game, right, of like wanting to be here. Yes, I always knew that. I didn't think it would happen this soon. So I'm 27 now. I started my business at 25. I got the full-time job at Raffinelli, I think when I was 21 or something like that. So I thought, like maybe when I'm 30, I don't know, or 27. Like now I thought I would be starting because I just didn't think I would have the capital I needed or the confidence or the experience. But none of that really matters. And we can talk about that. But
Yeah.
it was really a confidence issue. It was a what are these people and a self-consciousness. What will these people I'm working with think? So I didn't tell anybody I worked with that I wanted to be a wedding planner for my own business because I also, you don't really want to tell your boss that. Like, I'm going to leave you one day, but let me learn everything first,
Yeah.
I just gave everything I had to them when I was there. And when I was ready to go, I left. I didn't waste any time. It was very abrupt. I gave I gave them a month's notice actually. And then I was gone. And that opportunity gave me so many skills that I needed to do what I do now effectively. If I didn't work there for those almost 3 years, I think I still could have done it, but I don't think I would have been as confident in my wedding planning skills because when you see it all, so many expensive events, like, they did nonprofit galas that were a little bit less expensive, but very, very, very expensive with celebrities and things like that. When you see as far as an event can go, you can never be overwhelmed anymore by anything. And so those experiences and that exposure gave me the confidence on the tactical side of planning weddings. And where I lacked confidence was the entrepreneur side of having a business. So it was a big stepping stone to get there.
Yeah. I guess talk to us about how you felt ready in 2019. Was it a matter of saving a certain amount of money? Was it, you were building a brand on the side, or like how did you get to the point of going all in?
That's such a good question. So I have a lot to thank my husband for because I wasn't ready. He was like, "You're ready, go." Push me off the cliff. But he was starting his business. And so every day in our house, we're talking about being business owners every single night, like bitching about our jobs and our coworkers and our bosses, being like, "This sucks.
Yeah.
We can't take the vacations that we want. We can't do the traveling we want." We just had this obsession with being able to control our time. And so that was just something that already was ingrained in me well before 2019. This probably started in 2017. And then he, in 2019, left his job. We moved, he left his job, and he started a business in 2019. And we got married.
Wow.
Big year.
Yeah.
And that transition was happening. So I was going to take a step forward, leave my job in Boston and take a job in Rhode Island so that we could move from our very, very expensive apartment in Fenway to Rhode Island, where we ultimately wanted to settle anyway, but the rent was half the price for twice the space. And we needed to save money because he's starting a business. So I took a job in Newport, Rhode Island at a venue as like an interim step. And I was always supposed to be there for like a year and a half while my husband, Jake, got his business up and running. I hated that job. I hated it. My third day I came home, I cried so hard in his lap about how I hated everything about it. I popped a blood vessel on my face, and he was like, "Stick through it until the wedding is over. Get through the busy season, work hard, do what you need to do, and then leave and start your business." And so I wasn't ready. It was like a matter of like, it pushed me out the door. I'm a firm believer that the universe gives you everything that you need to make the steps that you need yourself. And I was ready. I had the experience. I could do it. I had already done 2 weddings pro bono to get their pictures and their review. And that started in 2018. So I had already had an archive of blogs that are on my website now. Like I wrote all of those in 2018, 2019. I was already doing, like, making the steps, but I wasn't taking the last step. And the job being so bad for me was the push that I needed and the encouragement from my husband that I could actually do it. So I left and I did it.
Wow. As you look back, I'm sure you made, as everyone does, the mistakes early on in
Oh yeah.
terms of how you know, in terms of the business, as you look at maybe the first 6 months or even the however long you want, first year, are there any learning lessons that you look back on and would give advice to someone thinking about starting their own business?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, one big lesson is like a lot of, no matter what someone else tells you about their cautionary tale, some lessons you just have to learn the hard way yourself. And you will never make those lessons again, especially someone like me in the hospitality industry, being a people pleaser with very little boundaries. So many mistakes I made, but I kept making them over and over again until they were really, really bad. And I felt like, oh my God, I never want to feel this way again. That's how I learned. So sometimes, like, no matter what you hear from someone else, you just got to go through it. But the first few months, so it was a little weird because I launched my business on March 3rd of 2020, and then COVID.
Oh, wow.
10 days later
Yeah.
came and literally took down the entire wedding industry that year. Everybody was affected. And I didn't have any clients. I launched, had 0 clients, super excited, ready for business. Everything shut down. So that was extremely scary. I don't remember being that nervous about it for some
Yeah.
reason. I just felt like, well, this is just the way it's supposed to be. We'll figure it out, because I think I almost felt more comfortable because even the wedding planners I looked up to in Newport, who've been in business for 10 years, were also struggling.
Mm.
And the best part about my position is that my husband and I financially had planned to make no money that year anyway.
Mm.
And so I thought, oh my God, it could be so much worse. I don't have kids that I'm worrying about feeding. I don't have to replan my entire season and put it to next year. I don't have to refund deposits. Like, I think that was the mentality I had, was like looking at everyone else being like, that could be a lot worse, but I'm okay. You know, like, we'll figure it out. A lot of the mistakes that I made, and you kind of just have to do this, is accepting money from the first person that wanted to pay me. You know, I have a very niche brand. I serve untraditional couples that want to celebrate their marriage their way. I don't really work with parents. I ended up working with a lot of parents. You know, like, some
Mm.
of them were great, some of them were awful, and
Yeah.
it affected my quality of life. And so I learned the hard way that I can say no, and I should say no, because the reality is, for a full service wedding, I'm spending 200 hours planning this person's wedding. And if you don't like them, you're SOL, because there's nothing you can do about it. You could probably fire them. And I have not, I have not fired one of my clients, but I have come very close multiple times to firing a client. And the way that I kind of get through it is this wonderful thing about the wedding industry. There's always an expiration date for when you stop working with that person. For my husband, it's a lot harder because he's a financial planner. So you're hiring him for life, really.
Okay.
As long, you know. So for me, it's like, let me just get to their wedding and then I'm done with them. And I don't want to have that mentality, because it's not a positive mentality to
Yeah.
have, but I'm still living with mistakes that I made 2 years ago, because, you know, we have clients that postponed because of COVID and things like that, and they're still around. And so it's just a constant reminder, just make sure that you pick them too. And another mistake that I made was specific to the wedding industry. You know, oh, you want to hire me, you want to pay my deposit, great, take it. And then after the fact, figure out, oh, you don't actually have enough money to pay for everything else that you need to match your expectations. And so I ended up making a whole separate package just called the 2-hour power planning session for newly engaged couples, just because of those situations happening all the time. So it's like, you tell me how much money you have to spend on your wedding, and I make sure your expectations are realistic. And then I make your full budget with those expectations line by line. And so that whole package, which is my most profitable package, was born from a mistake that I made, which is why it's like full circle. You just got to make mistakes sometimes and learn the hard way.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So that first mistake you were talking about is just being better on who you're accepting as a client. Is that
Yeah.
okay? That's
Mhm.
interesting. You mentioned Jake a couple of times, and um, you know, I'm curious because it seems like with the world today, young people are having a lot of trouble with love. The two of you, I guess you were 25 when you got married. But
Yeah.
do you have
Hmm.
any pieces of advice? It seems like more and more people are pushing that out and kind of
Yeah.
focusing on their careers, but the two of you have continued to focus on your careers and build businesses at the same time. So
Hmm.
any love advice for the
Yeah.
single women or men out there?
Go to karaoke night Thursday
Okay.
night, Lansdowne Street Pub. That is the place to find a husband. I'm
Yeah.
telling you. um it was not the plan, like, to get married young. I never thought that I would get married young. I think I got married, I think it was technically 24, and I turned 25 a couple months later. But we were engaged when I was 22, which is like unheard of in Boston, unheard of.
Yeah.
And I knew how unheard of it was, but like, we were just so positive and still are. Like, we're celebrating our 3rd year wedding anniversary this summer, and it's been a beautifully healthy and wonderfully joyful marriage. And so I remember getting engaged on a Friday, being 22, and having a pit in my stomach all weekend, not because I was engaged, because of what my coworkers would think about it. And at the time, I worked with a bunch of women who were basically 30, and a lot of them were either single or not married yet. And it wasn't,
It's hard.
I'll leave it there. I'll leave it
Yeah.
there. It wasn't always friendly. And
Yeah.
so I was just like, I'm going to get ripped apart by these women. And so I very reluctantly, went into the office, and I tried to keep my voice down and like make like dim my light. And I have a history of doing that with other women around me, being like trying to make myself smaller so that they feel better. And that is something I don't do anymore. It took a long time to figure out that that was something that I was doing and to readjust. But that whole situation got a lot better. We got married. And I think for Jake, his thing was, I want to be married when I'm starting my business. I want, or at least like know who my life partner is and be doing it with them. And it was never like we were going to start businesses together. It was always supposed to be delayed. It just ended up happening that way. But I think being married to another entrepreneur, we say so many times, good thing you own your own business too, because you would not understand what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And I could be very easily resentful of him working on weekends, or he could be very easily resentful of me going to Greece without him for a wedding, and there's just this very deep respect and understanding for what the other person is going through, because we're all going through it together. And like having anxiety if the amount of leads we got that month was low, I know exactly how he feels. It's
Mhm.
very hard if you're not in this mindset of being a CEO to empathize and like know what to say. So I think it's a huge blessing in disguise that we went through it at the same time, because even like hiring and firing and building a team, managing team members, like there's so many little things that have been happening side by side with both of our companies that we've been doing together, that just he's my best friend, he's my husband, and he's also like a really great business resource for me.
How do you guys you talked about it there, but how do you guys balance like turning that off and making sure you create time for you yourselves and your personal life in terms of
It's hard.
yeah.
We literally have a sticky note on the kitchen wall that says, talk about things other than work, money, and travel, because those are the 3 biggest things that we talk about. We're always talking about business struggles. We're always talking about money and when we're going to be able to afford to buy a house. And then we're always talking about what the next trip we're going on is, or where we went before. And sometimes like we get stuck in that cycle, which is great, because those are like our 3 top passions for both of us.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
really money, but like, traveling and making a life for ourselves. And so we have a designated date night. So every Tuesday is date night where we leave the house. And that is the biggest thing, because I'm right now in my house. This is my desk. Right behind that wall is his office. So we eat, sleep, breathe, work here. So
Yeah.
we need to get out of the house. So every Tuesday we go out, and then we've been doing like wine and chat, we call it. Jake may have talked about it when he was on your podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know how many months ago that was, but like check-ins with each other, making sure that each other's love tank is full. We use the love language vocabulary daily. I'm gifts. I know it's the shallow one, but I'm gifts and quality time, and he's physical touch and acts of service. And so we try. It's not perfect because we're both exhausted, especially in busy season like I am in right now. And he does these little bursts of surge meetings with his clients 3 times a year. So when busy season and surge meetings align, it's hard, but you set as many boundaries as you can. And we hope one day to have a house with like a separate office. So it's a little bit easier to divide.
Yeah. I guess for you, especially when thinking about that first year, building brand, do you have any pieces of advice when, obviously now, 3 years into it, you definitely have, brand off of the people that you've done and referrals and things like that. But that first year in terms of building your brand, when someone you don't know is thinking about maybe using you and this is their biggest day of their life, and I don't know, how did you create that trust, maybe from a non-referral?
Yeah. I think a lot of it, I was freaking out, right? Because I didn't have a wealth of portfolio pictures. I have the 2 wedding pictures that I that I did pro bono in their review to use. And I had my own wedding pictures, which ended up being a lot more valuable than I thought as far as the destination wedding realm goes, because we got married in Greece. But that was really it. So I had to establish credibility in other ways. So I was doing free webinars on how to postpone your wedding during COVID. I was writing more blogs. I was pumping out a blog every 2 weeks, just dumping knowledge so that people would actually take me seriously, especially because I was 25 and there was so much ageism. We think of ageism as like, usually, oh, someone's too old, they don't understand. But there was like reverse ageism for me. You're too young, you don't know enough. And that used to frustrate the hell out of me. Oh my God. And I was like, I know more than people twice my age. I try harder than people twice my age. Age doesn't matter. And so I would just do anything I could to build credibility in those ways and then be relatable on top of it. Like, hey, I'm your age. I just got married. I know what I'm doing on top of that. Like I used to look at all these places I used to work, And then as far as like the actual brand itself, I spent a lot of time and money up front, creating a website, creating brand colors, logos, things like that. I worked with my web designer, who's still my web designer today, Spect & Co. And that was a huge investment. But when you're quitting your job and jumping into it, and it's not just like a little side hustle that kind of drags along with you as you go through life, I just cut off the stream of income that I had. Now we're pouring these resources that we set aside for this reason into our businesses. Like Jake's website was extremely expensive and he's gotten so much praise on it from the whole community because no one spends that kind of money on a website, and same for me. A lot of wedding planners are just making their own websites, and that's completely fine if that's your game plan, if you don't have the capital to do it right now. But for us, we were like, we're putting all of our eggs in these baskets. It's got to be good. So that whole part of it, I think, builds credibility as well, because I followed Don Miller's Building Story Brand framework when I did the whole website and the copy and the wireframe and where everything was going to go. And so when someone comes onto the site, they're not just going to see the shitty portfolio pictures that I had. I mean, those weddings were beautiful. I don't want to call them shitty, but there were so few. They're going to see this copy that's relatable. They're going to see these colors that were intentionally picked to show them that we're trustworthy, the light blue, this little KNE blue, and the black were untraditional and also really polished and feel like they're in good hands. And then they'll go to the portfolio page and then they might notice that there's only a few photos there. And I did some styled shoots and things like that, but it was very intentional because I was super self-conscious about my credibility starting out.
Yeah. I'm curious also, setting rates is a tough thing as a entrepreneur. Was there like a certain profit margin that you would just set your rates based on, or how did you work that out?
I figured out based on the weddings that I did pro bono in 2018 and 2019, I tracked my hours to understand how long that took me. And I figured out what I felt comfortable charging as an hourly rate and then times it by the amount of hours it took and then use that as a baseline. And then I compared that to the market. So I'm in an expensive market physically right now, Newport, Rhode Island. Lots of people from New York are coming up to get married here and they're paying premium for it. Also, Boston is an expensive market. So I automatically up that price because I'm like, I can charge more. So those two factors kind of came into play there. Of course, I charge a fixed fee. So of course I would be working way over those hours on some weddings or a little bit under those hours. So in the beginning, it was figuring out where I actually landed and what I actually was making, and ended up raising the prices 3 times since then, basically like 1 price increase annually to make sure I'm covering all of the hidden costs that I didn't factor in the beginning, because there are a lot. You would be surprised. Yeah. Lots of costs for wedding planning.
Yeah. You talked about a little bit earlier about like combating burnout and learning to set healthy boundaries. I guess, do you want to talk about that learning lesson there and anything you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, when you're a people pleaser in a service industry that isn't charging hourly, you're constantly being asked, can you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? And I would say yes, no matter what the question was. That is a product of how I was bred to be at my previous job. You say yes, you make it work, whatever it takes, you hit that deadline. That's what I thought you were supposed to do. And then when I realized if I say yes to everyone as a one-woman show, I'm giving clients unrealistic expectations of what I'm capable of doing, how quickly I'm able to do the work, what is actually in the scope of services that they're paying for. I mean, I would say yes to things that they're literally not even paying me to do just because I couldn't set boundaries. And so eventually it all caught up to me. I mean, I remember it was after my first season, sitting on the bathroom floor, or the kitchen floor rather, and just like feeling like a shell, like nothing behind the eyes, like staring at the stove, with my head like bobbing like this. And I'm like, I am not okay. Like, it was scary to see myself that way. I hated everything. I hated my clients. I hated this job. I hated myself for doing this to me. It was really, really sad to see. And then I use that visualization of me sitting there feeling that way every single time someone asks me to do something. And I say, respectfully, no. That's not included. Yeah. If you want me to do that, this is the cost, or no. And I don't have time to do that, even if you wanted to pay for it. And no is such a powerful thing that no one ever taught me to do. Yeah. So, I think that can happen to anybody in any industry, but especially in a service-based industry, when it's a big gray area, you have to be the advocate of what you are able to do and when you can get that done by.
Yeah. A big part of your brand is your social media, and you had a lot of growth, in a short period of time. I think. Do you want to talk about any aspects of that for anybody else in a similar boat of like growing on Instagram and maybe getting comments that aren't always the best or things like that?
Yeah. Oh God, Instagram drove me to therapy. Therapy was the best thing that ever happened to me, but it legitimately put me in therapy. Wow. Because of the trolls. But so my Instagram grew from, I don't even know, 1,000 followers to 16,000 followers in the matter of like 7 months. And that was with the rollout of Reels that Instagram just brought in during 2020. It was like end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And I started doing the Reels because I wasn't getting the leads that I wanted. I was getting very traditional couples. they were viable leads. They had the money, they were in the right location. They were not the right personality. And especially if you reach out with your mom, you're not the right personality.
Yeah.
For me, at least. There's so many other people that would love to plan with your mom. I do not want to plan with your mom. And I started doing reels because I interviewed a few of the clients that I did have that were ideal for me. And I said, where do you spend your time? Where do you consume content? And they all said they like to do Instagram reels. And so I just started fiddling with it because I had the video production background from broadcast journalism. I did learn a couple things in my 2 years as a journalist major. So I was already fine in front of the camera and I could edit videos pretty quickly. And I just started making videos because I didn't have the portfolio. So before reels, the way that wedding planners in my market, pretty much all over the country, were marketing was every single day they posted one pretty photo of the wedding every day with some BS caption and all the vendors that were there. And that was fine. If that's the way if you have that archive of pictures and you are getting people reacting to it, that is fine. But I didn't have enough pictures to do that. So I used my face and my personality. And I said, well, if I want them to be like me, I'm just going to be myself on reels. And so I love Schitt's Creek and I love Gilmore Girls and I like Parks and Rec. And if there were sounds on reels that were like that, then I would make a reel about it and relate it back to a wedding planning problem and educate them while entertaining them. Edutain, as they say. And so that was the growth. I was posting like 3 reels a week and shot up to over 16,000. I don't have the time to pump out that type of content now. So of course you're going to trickle down. And that is a whole other emotional struggle with yourself to make sure that a follower count is a vanity metric. It doesn't mean anything unless you're actually converting clients. And I don't have time, and my books aren't even open for 2024 to convert any clients. So that's okay if I'm losing followers and I don't post right now. So that's kind of why I started doing it. And then of course you're going to get hate because everyone is on the internet with an opinion, and some people just choose to shove that opinion in your face, and that's fine. I've just stopped reading captions, honestly, because it was getting so bad, especially on TikTok. I don't post on TikTok anymore. I was getting so many people that were like 15-year-olds, first of all, not the target market.
Yeah.
And also people who were just blatant trolls. And then you have people that aren't necessarily a troll, but rudely disagree with you. And that's the stuff that would just knife me in the heart. And usually when they're rudely disagreeing with you, they're not actually reading the caption. They're not actually reading what you're saying. So for example, I posted a reel about how to negotiate with wedding vendors and a whole caption about don't ask for a discount. Ask for a reduction in services to see if that can meet your budget. People didn't read that part. So they're like, you are the worst person in the world for telling people to ask for a discount. You're not appreciating our services. And I'm like, all right. And I don't respond to those anymore because that's someone who's committed to misunderstanding me. And why do I waste my time trying to explain to someone who's committed to misunderstanding with me? So that's where I found my peace with that. I just stopped reading the captions after 48 hours that a reel is up, because at that point it's strangers. It's not my natural network who are commenting. And the therapy certainly helped with realizing that even if someone does put a bad comment, 5 minutes later, they're not thinking about you anymore. And I think we get, as human beings, in the habit of thinking everyone's constantly thinking bad things about us when no one cares. They're worried about themselves. They're thinking the same thing about them. So that was a lot of emotional growth through all of that struggle with the social media as well.
Yeah. I don't want, you don't need to tell us your secrets, but like in terms of specifically the wedding, we've talked about general business advice, but specifically about maybe starting a wedding planning business or an events planning business. Are there any piece of advice that comes to mind for someone out there that might be looking to start their own company?
I think get the tactical skills first. So if you're good at planning weddings, start there. And if you don't feel like you're good enough or you don't have enough experience. It's not about the years, it's about the exposure. So in one season, you could work freelance for 5 different wedding planners and see 5 different ways to do something. Pick the best little pieces of everything and make your own process. I think more than 1 year is probably best, but you don't have to have a decade under your belt to start a business. It's also one of those rare industries where you don't have to have any certification or any college degree or anything really at all to be a viable option. Pros and cons to that, because
Yeah.
you hope that you have someone that actually knows what they're doing. But it is one of those forgiving industries where if you are just really humble, really hungry, really gritty, and really motivated, you can figure it out by shadowing and freelancing for other people. And then as far as like making the jump to starting your own business, I think you need to just know ahead of time that just because you're a really good wedding planner doesn't mean you're going to be a really good business owner. And that's what happened to me. Like, I got the wedding thing, the business owning thing. Whoa, like, no idea. Thank God for Jake, because he literally held my hand through every step of the process. So when people come and they see me and the weddings that I do, like, I want them to know that it was not naturally easy for me to market to those people, even though I have a marketing degree. It wasn't easy to sell to those people. I had to practice selling. Jake taught me everything I know about selling. I had to figure out how to charge people. I had to figure out still how to manage people, because I was in the hospital, last month because of COVID, and there's no one to take the work from you. And that's scary. Like, no one tells you that. So I think just making sure you're excited by all of these things, these scary things. And if any of what I just said are deal breakers for you, know that beforehand. And then, that's fine. There's so many other, like, I'm hiring, like, there's so many other ways to do what you love. But if you really, really have it in you to go for it, be an entrepreneur and put your tactical skills to work, like I said before, there's just some lessons that you got to learn the hard way, and that's okay. And it's okay if you're not naturally good at it up front.
Yeah. You said it right there. I'm curious, any advice on knowing when the right time is to hire your first employee?
Yeah. Well, when I was staring at the stove, that was the right time. I think the second that you feel it's like hard, right? Because you almost will always take on more than you can. And then get to that point where you start to resent your clients and you start to feel burnout, like hire then,
Yeah.
There's so many different ways to hire. It's not as big of a commitment as it has to be. Like, it's not like you're giving someone $50,000 a year salary. You can hire someone for a maximum of 10 hours a week, $20 an hour, or whatever you want to pay them. That's what I paid my first hire. Like, you can build in protections for yourself so that it stays within your budget. And if you pay hourly and you can't, you don't have enough work for them or whatever, that's why you have a maximum limit. And they should know that when they're starting. When there's work to do, you will get paid. And there are people out there that want those responsibilities. They want that type of exposure to these companies. They want the flexibility, the lifestyle flexibility. So I wouldn't be too worried about, oh God, it's so scary. I'm not going to make money anymore because I'm hiring. Hire when you need the help and figure out the structure after.
Yeah. If we could transition maybe to couples right now who are in the process of thinking about wedding planning, maybe some pieces of advice that maybe like um, how to should they do an elopement, a destination wedding, a traditional wedding? Do you have any pieces of advice on that aspect?
So I always tell couples who are newly engaged, enjoy it first. Don't listen to anyone else's opinions. And then sit down over a date night with some drinks and ask yourself, what is the most important thing to me on our wedding day? And then ask yourself, 10 years from now, what do I want to look back and remember most from that day? And then ask yourself, what do we want to feel and experience on this day? and write your answers down and use those as the basis of what this is going to be, because you shouldn't just be like, your first conversation about wedding planning shouldn't be like, so who's going to do our cake? It's like, whoa, back up. Do you even like cake? Do you even want a cake? You know, like, blow up the structure by starting with your deep-rooted values and priorities first. And I do these power planning sessions, these 2-hour sessions with newly engaged couples to kind of facilitate that exercise. And there's a few more questions that I ask them, but I call it a values and priorities exercise, because that exercise, the responses that I get, I PDF them and I send them to the couple after the session. And I say, put this on your refrigerator or put it under your pillow. And anytime over the next year and a half, you're planning this wedding, you feel like you're being swayed by outside opinions. Mom's guilting you into having the cake. Cousins guilting you for a +1, all of this stuff. And you start to question what you really wanted in the first place, pull it out and read it and be like, that's right. I did say we want an intimate wedding. We don't like cake, so we're not going to do it. It's kind of like a validation for you, like a reminder, like your beacon as you're going through wedding planning. But I would say, like, start with that, not assuming you want to have a traditional wedding, because you don't have to do anything on your wedding day besides sign a marriage license. That's all that makes it a wedding, you know? And a lot of times when I get couples talking to me who want to elope, they're like, so what should we do for dinner? And I'm like, do you like dinner? Like, you want to go get ice cream? You know?
Yeah.
And like, what should we do? Like, I don't really know what to do all day with a photographer around. Like, go to Six Flags. I don't know. Like, what do you like to do? Like, I always say, if it was your birthday and you had an unlimited budget, like within reason, but unlimited, and it was just you and your partner, what would you do on the best birthday ever? Do that on your wedding day. And I've had couples take that exercise and end up hiring a private chef to come to an Airbnb and cook them a dinner after they got married on a little hike outside, you know, like just beautiful little moments that you like to do. No agenda, no timeline, no structure, no tradition.
Yeah.
You can have tradition if you want, but like, you don't have to.
Yeah. I have to ask, how do you handle stress? Because I'm sure as the wedding planner, there's always last minute changes that the couples request or things of that nature. And you're like, oh my.
On the wedding day itself, you have no choice but to be unwaveringly calm. And I feel like an actress sometimes, like when people are telling me things and I'm like, not a problem. Of course, just relax. And on the inside, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But you have no choice. And I think I used to be a martial arts instructor for young children. And that is one of the biggest lessons that my martial arts school taught me. No matter what kind of day you had or you're having, when you walk through the door to the karate school, it's not about you. It's about them. And you turn it on. And when you leave, you can deal with what you left at the door. And it's the same on a wedding day. When you get up, I drink liquid IV, I drink iced tea, I drink athletic greens, I bring beef jerky. Like, it's literally like a marathon. It's like a show performance for me. And I tell the staff the same too. You can't show any sign of stress. And internally, you can just go and, like, you know, behind the tent wall, vent to the staff, and then you're back out. Be all smiley again, but you just deal with it. And leading up to the wedding day, a lot of my stress is relieved by meditation and yoga. And I love crystals, healing crystals. I'm like a big crystal nut. So stuff like that, like very spiritually healing things are what help me through like the day to day. And then on the wedding day, you just roll with it.
Yeah. I have to ask, because I saw you and Jake went to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was so cool. So we spent a big portion of what we had set aside for a down payment on a house on this trip to Antarctica, because I am obsessed. We both are obsessed with traveling, and that was going to be my 7th continent. And it was been a long time goal for me since like 2015, ever since my friend gave me this book about the most obscure places in the world. And I saw Antarctica and I said, I'm going to go there. And anytime I see a map and say, I'm going to go there, I go there within 5 years. And so I also know about Antarctica that you cannot be pregnant there. You can't bring children there. And being a 27-year-old married woman who eventually will start a family, this seemed like a urgent trip for me. So that's why we went now. And we also were at a point where like the businesses were kind of in a way, like I was in slow season. He was in between surges. So December was the perfect time. We missed Christmas for it. No regrets.
Yeah.
And we went. And so we did a 10-day tour, I guess you'd say. And we flew down to the Ushuaia, which is the southernmost town of Argentina, the tip of South America, and then sailed 3 days out to Antarctica, the Antarctic Peninsula. And then we were there for 4 days and then sailed back across the Drake Passage, which is very stormy seas, like the roughest seas in the world. And they were rough, like even with our advanced boat with stabilizers, bodies were hitting the wall rough. Like this boat was shaking.
Yeah.
It was great though. It was so cool. And we saw penguins, we saw seals and whales right under our boat, crystal blue water. It was otherworldly. It was an experience that I will cherish forever. It was the coolest thing.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds amazing. Okay, we talked about a lot. Was there something you wanted to share, whether on personal, business, life, weddings,
We talked
that
about so much.
we didn't
We
get to talk
we
about?
hit like all my narratives, the Catholic school, the boundaries, the social media issues, the therapy, like all of that stuff, the travel. Yeah, I feel like you got a really well-rounded picture of why I am the way I am. I think took a while, but I do feel like I've learned a lot of lessons the hard way to be who I am today.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all we talked about.
Do you want to, if I can, you don't need to answer. Do you want to talk about therapy and
Sure.
how it might have helped? I know a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
business owners could probably use it. But
I'm an open book.
Yeah.
My husband always jokes, like if someone new meets me, I'm like, hi, I'm Kay. My therapist's name is Anne. Like I would just tell everybody. I was in therapy with my first therapist from, I want to say this was July of 2020. So like the first couple months of being a business owner I just graduated, we say, with her a few weeks ago. And the reason why I started was just debilitating anxiety, largely related to being a business owner and largely related to social media as well. I mean, I was already doubting myself, and people on social media would doubt me too. I was like, why am I even here? Why am I even doing this? I'm such a fraud. Lots of imposter syndrome, as I know many millions of other business owners have. And it was getting to a point where it was hindering my ability to do anything, to get up, to feel confident. So we started therapy, and a lot of what we worked on over the 2 years with this specific therapist was realizing that I can't control other people's feelings, and that, you know, not everybody's thinking about you, stuff like those are the big themes, and setting boundaries and demanding respect from people is okay if you're being disrespected, you know, and these are things like confrontation and all that stuff used to make me super, super uncomfortable. So I basically became more mature, more hardened in a way where it's not like I'm muting my personality. I'm louder than ever, but I'm more sculpted, like as a human. I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are the words that are coming to mind. But I think that if you are a business owner, a lot of people will say like, what's your first piece of advice? I'm like, get a good therapist, because there's just someone else to talk to. And I think I was lucky that I had my husband, and my husband has me, but having someone else that's very unbiased, that's seeing it through your lens, that's just there to listen weekly or bi-weekly is huge. I know that therapy is a privilege that I was lucky enough to afford. So obviously, you know, if you don't have the means, there are people, you know, certain insurance covers it, certain platforms will give you like financial aid or discounts and things like that. I did BetterHelp and they had a lot of like resources for discounts and things like that. So
Yeah.
check that out if you need it. But otherwise, just like starting is the hardest part. Like going on and just like, even if it's BetterHelp or if it's through your health insurance, whatever, just like making an account and starting. Like that is the hardest part. And then
Yeah.
you talk about yourself every week. And I love to talk.
Yeah. 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 And I think ultimately it betters yourself, which is good for you, but then it also ends up bettering your business and your
Yeah,
personal life and all that. So it's a
absolutely.
tool for
It's a
bettering
win-win.
yourself more than for weakness or people that are
Mm-hmm.
crazy, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can handle everything so much better when you have the tools that therapy gives you.
Yeah. Well, Kay, I just want to thank you and acknowledge you. It's been really cool to kind of study your journey and hear from it here today. Um,
Thank
I
you.
don't know if you've given yourself credit, but to be 27 and a full-time entrepreneur and booked out for 2024, is that what you said?
I haven't opened the books yet for 2024. I
Oh,
need to
okay.
get through this season. We're
Okay.
booked out. I'm booked out through 2023.
Oh, yeah, booked out through 2023.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I hope you feel it, but like you're crushing it,
Thank
not a
you.
lot of people in their 20s can be a full-time entrepreneur. So that's awesome.
Thank
If
you.
people want to support you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can go to my Instagram. It's at K Northrup, just my name. And I also post like every Wednesday, I do Ask K Wednesday. So it's like an open question box and it's for couples who are engaged needing wedding advice, but it's also for like business and entrepreneurship questions. So if you're a business owner or if you're engaged or both, check out Ask K Wednesday in my stories on Instagram at K Northrup.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for talking about your personal business and wedding planning. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you.